Welcome to DVC Finance. What is the general fund and how can I remove it from the net debt service report? This is one of our most frequently asked questions. We get a lot of support emails about this specific issue. Well, the general fund in DVC Finance is an account which holds revenues which are received on dates that aren't debt service dates. That also holds revenues which occur on debt service payment dates, but are greater than the debt service paid. The general fund's inflows and outflows are shown on the net debt service report. Deposits to the general fund are shown on the net debt service report as negative numbers. Withdrawals from the general fund are shown as positive numbers on the net debt service report. So monies held in the general fund are usually derived from investment income. Two of the most common examples are one, earnings from gross funded investments, which are directed to debt service or non-applicable which is greater than the actual debt service paid on the receipt date. So the general fund holds those revenues until the entire amount is eventually applied and paid towards debt service. Excess investment earnings typically occurs when there's a capitalized interest fund and its earnings or earnings from other gross funded investments are not being directed to the CAPI fund during the CAPI period. Another common cause is the interest on debt service reserve funds, which are greater than bond interest, which occurs in the last 1 or 2 fiscal years as the outstanding bond balance falls below the reserve fund balance. Another common examples are draws from reserve funds in excess of net debt service. In some cases, the draws from reserve funds are greater than the debt service paid on the draw date. An example could be a draw of a reserve fund principal that's greater than scheduled debt service, or the way a capitalized interest fund is funded. Perhaps it's gross funded. And so 100% of interest that's accrued, well, not equal to the interest due on those dates unless it's net funded. Some lesser common examples are income from negative ongoing expenses, as well as accrued interest at delivery. If accrued interest at delivery is retained in the general fund, then it will be shown on the net debt service report. That option can be changed within debt size assumptions. Let's get down to it. Here's an example series that's been created. You've entered in general dates and the debt size assumptions. You set up your bond components, your construction funds, your issuance expense, the reserve, and your capitalized interest fund. Typically, the most common example of a general fund that's created in the net debt service report is when you go in and you create capitalized interest fund and you have bond interest accrued through a particular date so that it's going to capitalize 100% of the interest through that period. But you also create a reserve fund. Within the reserve fund, you did not specify where to apply interest earnings of the reserve fund during that CAPI period. So remember, the capitalized interest fund will take care of 100% of the interest due through that particular date. The reserve fund interest earnings have nowhere to go during that capitalized interest period. Debt service is already taken care of. So the program has to create a general fund. You can see here, nothing has been changed. What happens is after you calculate and then view the net debt service report, you will now see a general fund equal to the reserve fund interest earnings. If this is fine and you want the reserve fund to not be applied anywhere, and you don't want the general fund, you would rather move that amount into the net debt service column, all you have to do is go into debt size assumptions, advanced, in the general tab at the bottom, share excess revenues with external series. Calculate. And then you will notice after you calculate, you go back into the net debt service report and you will see it moved. Now it'll be shown typically as a negative value. Obviously, if you modify the report to annual, then that negative amount will get absorbed into the positive on a 7/1 basis and won't see it. Generally, though, that is not the case. So go back and uncheck it. Generally, how this is fixed in order for the general fund to no longer be needed, no longer be shown in the net debt service, is in the reserve fund, you will need to tell the program where the interest earnings you want it to flow into during the cap out period. And then typically then it will draw down debt service. That could be applied towards cap I, project fund, any other kind of fund. For this example, we'll have it applied towards the capitalized interest fund. Now, when we calculate, click print and view the report, we will see capitalized interest fund and the reserve fund begins to draw down debt after the capitalized interest fund. You can also verify directly the capitalized interest fund report, and you will see the deposit, the interest plus principal, plus the reserve fund interest earnings, all is calculated and gets applied towards the necessary draws. So another example is a particular fund may not calculate as net funded. Where net funded, it's the interest earnings plus the principal that it gets applied towards the draws or any kind of balance. In this case, in this example, it would be keeping it as gross funded, which means the interest earnings typically is going to be applied outside of the fund. If you don't direct it, it's not going to be applied with principal towards those draws. Click OK. And it can also be a combination of not directing the interest earnings from the reserve fund to another fund during the cap I period, as well as the capitalized interest funds is not including the interest to be applied with its principal to draw down interest. I'm going to remove it, right, just to show you. This is an example. And you'll see here the capitalized interest fund, it's greater than the interest due on that date. Again, we could go to the capitalized interest fund And you notice it's by that amount that gets removed. So before, typically a capitalized interest fund is net funded. Therefore, the deposit will be interest plus principal being applied towards the draws. Gross funded, it assumes that interest is not going to be applied within that particular fund. Hopefully this helps, and hopefully this will resolve any kind of issues whenever you now see your net debt service report and you wonder what a general fund happens to be. How do you get rid of it? If you want to see or have more information, you can always press F1 key in DBC Finance, go to the FAQ section, and you can scroll down to report generation questions. And we have a very specific subject. What is the general fund? Can I remove it from the net service report? Thank you for viewing.